latest diesel conversion. This is I think it's a 1951 or 52 Simplicity Model M1. Originally came with a big Briggs & Stratton engine. A buddy of mine at work gave it to me because he was done with it. The very original engines, I'm not sure where it is, but he had or somebody that he knew had a 7 horsepower Tecumseh on it. So like all the older engines, they have carburetor problems and things like that. So I had actually got 4 of these Petter engines from a guy that I'm not sure where he got them from, but they were used as the power source for road signs back in the day. I think they're in the 80s, but I'm not sure. So anyway, I had a little trouble getting this one started when I first put it on there because the fuel pump wasn't putting out any fuel, and apparently the rack was stuck, so I ended up taking that out. Where's the darn fuel pump? Right here. I just took that off and pulled it out and moved the rack, and it was free, so put it back in, started pumping fuel, and after that started up. But these engines were originally designed to run at 2100 RPM to charge a 12-volt system. And of course they have their starter on here. Took a little bit to retrofit. Had to add these channel pieces off the edge, and of course this engine's a lot heavier than the Briggs that was on there. This is like 100 and some, over 100 pounds, 110 pounds I believe. So I had to build a little counterweight on here to make it manageable. So that kind of helps that out a little bit. But one of the main reasons I wanted to kind of capture what I did here is these engines are set to run at fixed speed, and it has to do with this threaded bolt. I think it's like a 5/8 fine thread. That pushes on a spring that's hooked to the governor. I'm not sure what it all looks like in there, as I didn't have it apart, but essentially if you want to speed it up, you turn that in. It compresses a spring, and if you want to slow it down, you back it out. But otherwise the engine just runs at 2100 RPM, which is fine, but I kind of wanted it to be variable speed. So I went down this path, and what I ended up doing here is welding a 7/16 socket on there, and then I bought this. This is called a gearless 90-degree drive. So it seemed like one of the better things that I could do for getting this to work. So, and essentially all that does is brings it up to the handle here. I just put on a gear that I had from an old tractor that was wore out, and made a nice hand wheel. But anyway, if you're going to go down this route, and this is not the most ideal in my opinion. It should be closer to what the factory variable speed drives are, or variable speed levers are. But I've never really seen a good picture of them. I just saw picture or videos of them on YouTube, but they don't really talk about what it takes to build one. So I suspect the variable speed ones have a smooth shaft with O-rings or something, because this will leak a little bit of oil. You can see where it's been leaking out there. And this spring, all I did, it's probably not necessary, it's probably not doing me any good, but the thought was to keep a little tension on the threads so the oil can't get out as easily. But it's inevitably it's going to happen. So whether you have that spring or not in there is probably irrelevant. Had to end up tacking everything together, because otherwise, this is a 1/4 inch drive, but it will fall off. And then one of the things you got to watch here is that you don't loosen it out until it completely falls out, which I think the engine will keep on running at a low RPM, but of course your kill switch is here, right to the off position, left to the run. That just shuts your fuel rack off. So anyway, and then the other thing to consider is you're going to have a slotted piece here, because as that screw moves in and out, of course this has to move in and out with it, but I wanted to leave that socketed, but I had to end up welding it, otherwise it kept working itself off. So anyway, that's one way of doing it. It's not the smoothest. I wish it was a little bit better, but you know, welding things together doesn't keep them in perfect alignment either like I'd like, but it does work, and it's better than leaving it at a fixed speed. So anyway, I flipped the muffler upside down and welded this on because it just blew too much smoke like the older diesels do. And I might have to drill a hole in the bottom of that to let the water that accumulates out of there. What else? So I bought it for the sickle, well, got it for the sickle mower. I was originally going to give it to my sister, but I found something a little bit smaller, and it's actually a little bit better. So this was pretty well slopped out in here. When you run, the whole thing would shake back and forth. It was pretty bad, so I welded it back up and put a different bolt in that has some smooth part of the shank in there versus just threads. It actually left an indentation of threads in a slot, so that tells you it wasn't working the greatest. But otherwise, the joints that actually took grease, looks like somebody kept greasing them, and they're fairly tight, at least good enough to get it to work. And I just threw some lube on there just to, I'm afraid this is going to have to go outside because I'm running out of garage space. But fuel tank, these were originally came with like 25-gallon tanks that had electric fuel pumps to them. I just took this plastic tank off the other Tecumseh engine and mounted it on there. Not the greatest, but this can go back and be put back on the Tecumseh someday if that's what somebody wants to do. And it is nice to have the electric start feature on there, which is 12 volt. And but I found that just cranking it over by hand is good enough if you don't if it doesn't jerk back on you. So I think what you're supposed to do is turn that up until it gets compression, and then you're supposed to release it and go by it a little bit, and then start it. I kind of did that at this point. So anyway, go ahead and we'll give it a whirl here, show you how it runs, and that'll be it. So still kind of puffing a little bit of blue smoke. Kind of off and on. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but so it's almost like the governor is kind of surging a little bit. I don't know. It wasn't doing that earlier, so not sure what's really causing that. Shakes a little bit. That's kind of touchy. Like I said, you gotta be careful not to thread that all the way out, otherwise that spring could fall out of there, and you just gotta put it back in, but it's not a big deal. So it's probably turning about $1,000 there, which I think is the minimum RPM. And so anyway, that's kind of the latest project. I'll have to do something with tightening up this linkage so it doesn't drift down and catch. But just thought I'd videotape that. One thing I didn't see, that I'm not getting any fuel out of the return line from the injector, and I've ran it for probably over an hour, so I thought I would have seen some by now. And anyway, hope you guys enjoy this. Maybe you can find a similar application. It's always nice to get this stuff that's rarely used over diesel, so you don't have to fight carburetor and points problems and all the other things. So hoping this is pretty reliable. I don't know how many hours it has on it or whatever, but I think it's going to be better than what I had on there. Thanks for watching.